June 1944. The fate of Europe hung in the balance. The Allied armies had landed in Normandy. Thousands of ships had crossed the English Channel. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were pouring into France. And somewhere deep inside German headquarters, military commanders were desperately trying to answer one question. Where would the next attack come from? For Adolf Hitler and his generals, information was everything. A single mistake could cost entire divisions. A wrong decision could open the door to an Allied breakthrough. The Germans needed intelligence. They needed reconnaissance. They needed to know where the Americans were going. But there was one problem. Sometimes the Americans wanted the Germans to see something that wasn't actually there. And that's where one of the strangest military units in history entered the war. A unit so unusual that many soldiers wouldn't believe it existed. A unit armed not with powerful weapons, but with deception. Inflatable tanks, fake artillery, recorded sound effects, and some of the most creative minds in the United States Army. Their mission wasn't to destroy the enemy. Their mission was to trick him. Today, this unit is known as the Ghost Army. Officially, it was called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. But the men who served inside it were anything but ordinary soldiers. Many were artists, painters, architects, illustrators, designers, advertising experts. The kind of people you would expect to find in New York studios, not on European battlefields. Some had attended prestigious art schools. Others had successful careers waiting for them back home. Yet during World War II, these men found themselves carrying out one of the most unusual assignments of the entire war. They were asked to create an illusion. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. And the lives of thousands of Allied soldiers would depend on whether that illusion worked. The idea sounded almost ridiculous. Instead of building real armies, they would build fake ones. Instead of deploying actual tanks, they would deploy inflatable tanks. Instead of moving divisions across the battlefield, they would create the appearance of divisions moving across the battlefield. Their goal was simple: convince German intelligence that large American forces existed where no such forces actually existed. If the deception worked, German commanders would move troops to the wrong places. They would prepare for attacks that never came. They would waste resources. And most importantly, they would leave other areas vulnerable to real Allied offensives. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If the Germans discovered the truth, the deception would collapse instantly. Thousands of American lives could be lost. Entire operations could fail. But if the deception succeeded, it could change the course of battles, and perhaps even shorten the war itself. The men of the Ghost Army knew this. Every mission required absolute secrecy. They couldn't tell friends. They couldn't tell family. Many couldn't even tell other American soldiers exactly what they were doing. For decades after the war, much of their story remained classified. Most Americans never knew they existed. Most history books barely mention them. Yet time and time again, this strange collection of artists and illusionists would fool one of the most powerful military machines in history. And before the war ended, they would carry out operations so daring that even some German commanders believed they were facing entire American divisions, when in reality, they were facing an illusion. June 1944, the fate of Europe hung in the balance. The Allied armies had landed in Normandy. Thousands of ships had crossed the English Channel. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were pouring into France. And somewhere deep inside German headquarters, military commanders were desperately trying to answer one question. Where would the next attack come from? For Adolf Hitler and his generals, information was everything. A single mistake could cost entire divisions. A wrong decision could open the door to an Allied breakthrough. The Germans needed intelligence. They needed reconnaissance. They needed to know where the Americans were going. But there was one problem. Sometimes the Americans wanted the Germans to see something that wasn't actually there. And that's where one of the strangest military units in history entered the war. A unit so unusual that many soldiers wouldn't believe it existed. A unit armed not with powerful weapons, but with deception. Inflatable tanks, fake artillery, recorded sound effects, and some of the most creative minds in the United States Army. Their mission wasn't to destroy the enemy. Their mission was to trick him. Today, this unit is known as the Ghost Army. Officially, it was called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. But the men who served inside it were anything but ordinary soldiers. Many were artists, painters, architects, illustrators, designers, advertising experts. The kind of people you would expect to find in New York studios, not on European battlefields. Some had attended prestigious art schools. Others had successful careers waiting for them back home. Yet during World War II, these men found themselves carrying out one of the most unusual assignments of the entire war. They were asked to create an illusion, not once, not twice, but repeatedly. And the lives of thousands of Allied soldiers would depend on whether that illusion worked. The idea sounded almost ridiculous. Instead of building real armies, they would build fake ones. Instead of deploying actual tanks, they would deploy inflatable tanks. Instead of moving divisions across the battlefield, they would create the appearance of divisions moving across the battlefield. Their goal was simple: convince German intelligence that large American forces existed where no such forces actually existed. If the deception worked, German commanders would move troops to the wrong places. They would prepare for attacks that never came. They would waste resources. And most importantly, they would leave other areas vulnerable to real Allied offensives. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If the Germans discovered the truth, the deception would collapse instantly. Thousands of American lives could be lost. Entire operations could fail. But if the deception succeeded, it could change the course of battles, and perhaps even shorten the war itself. The men of the Ghost Army knew this. Every mission required absolute secrecy. They couldn't tell friends. They couldn't tell family. Many couldn't even tell other American soldiers exactly what they were doing. For decades after the war, much of their story remained classified. Most Americans never knew they existed. Most history books barely mention them. Yet time and time again, this strange collection of artists and illusionists would fool one of the most powerful military machines in history. And before the war ended, they would carry out operations so daring that even some German commanders believed they were facing entire American divisions, when in reality, they were facing an illusion. By the summer of 1944, the Ghost Army was finally ready. Months of preparation, months of planning, months of training. Now came the moment that would determine whether the entire concept worked. Could a handful of artists, designers, and illusionists truly fool the German army? The answer would begin with one of the most unusual weapons ever deployed in inflatable tanks. At first glance, they looked ridiculous. Deflated, they could be folded and carried by only a few men. Some weighed less than 100 pounds. A small group of soldiers could unload them from a truck and deploy them within minutes. But once inflated, they looked remarkably convincing, especially from the air. The Ghost Army used realistic inflatable versions of American Sherman tanks, artillery pieces, trucks, and armored vehicles, from hundreds or even thousands of feet above the ground. German reconnaissance. Pilots often couldn't tell the difference. That was the entire point. The deception didn't need to fool someone standing 10 feet away. It only needed to fool enemy observers who were gathering intelligence from a distance. And when combined with clever positioning, camouflage, and realistic camp activity, the illusion became surprisingly effective. But visual deception alone wasn't enough. The Germans weren't stupid. They didn't rely solely on photographs. They listened. They monitored radio communications. They analyzed movement patterns. So the Ghost Army expanded the deception. Entire fake encampments appeared overnight. Rows of inflatable tanks stretched across open fields. Fake artillery positions lined roads. Supply trucks seemed to arrive and depart constantly. Soldiers deliberately left footprints, created vehicle tracks, hung laundry, cooked meals, built campfires. Everything was designed to create the impression of a massive military force. Preparing for action, the illusion became even more impressive after dark. German observers watching from a distance saw lights, movement, activity, exactly what they would expect from a large American formation. And then came the first major test. In June 1944, shortly after the D-Day landings, the Ghost Army began supporting Allied operations in France. Their mission was simple: convince German commanders that American forces were positioned somewhere they were, not If successful, German troops would move toward the fake threat and away from the real one. The stakes were enormous. Thousands of Allied soldiers depended on German commanders making the wrong decision. Every hour of confusion could save lives. Every incorrect German troop movement could weaken enemy defenses elsewhere. The Ghost Army got to work. Inflatable tanks appeared. Fake headquarters emerged. Vehicle activity increased. Radio operators generated convincing communications traffic. The illusion grew larger and larger. Then everyone waited. Would the Germans believe it? Days passed. Reports arrived. German units were reacting. Reconnaissance aircraft reported American formations. Enemy intelligence officers documented troop concentrations. Commanders adjusted deployments. The deception was working. The men of the Ghost Army could hardly believe it. What had started as an experimental concept was now influencing real decisions. German forces were moving because of armies that didn't actually exist. Resources were being committed to positions that contained little more than tanks and talented actors. The success energized the entire unit. For the first time, they had proof. The Germans could be fooled, not occasionally, not accidentally, systematically, and if they could be fooled once, they could be fooled again. The implications were enormous, because every successful deception increased the value of the Ghost Army. Every operation demonstrated that a relatively small group of specialists influence events far beyond their numbers. The unit contained barely over 1,000 men. Yet through deception, they could create the appearance of tens of thousands. Entire divisions seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Entire armies seemed to move across the battlefield. And the Germans kept reacting. The experiment had succeeded. But the most impressive deceptions were still ahead. Because soon, the Ghost Army would add something even more extraordinary to its arsenal. A weapon no one could see. A weapon no one could touch. A weapon that could convince German soldiers they were hearing an army that exists. And it would become one of the most brilliant tricks of the entire war. If inflatable tanks were strange, what came next was even stranger. Because the Ghost Army wasn't satisfied with fooling the enemy's eyes. They wanted to fool the enemy's ears too. Military planners understood an important reality. A real army doesn't just look like an army. It sounds like one. Thousands of soldiers moving. Hundreds of vehicles operating. Tanks rumbling down roads. Engineers building bridges. Convoys arriving. Artillery being positioned. An entire military force creates a unique soundscape. And German intelligence officers knew it. That meant a fake army needed more than fake equipment. It needed a fake voice. To solve this problem, the U.S. Army assembled a special sound unit, officially known as the WWII Signal Service Company. Its mission was unlike anything most soldiers had ever heard of, literally. The men traveled with powerful speakers mounted on military vehicles. These weren't ordinary loudspeakers. They were specially designed systems capable of projecting sound over long distances. In ideal conditions, the recordings could sometimes be heard more than 10 miles away. Think about that. 10 miles. Far enough for German observers to believe an entire armored division was moving nearby. The recordings themselves were carefully created. Sound engineers recorded real military activities. Sherman tanks moving across roads. Truck convoys traveling through mud. Bulldozers operating. Infantry marching. Bridges being constructed. Every noise was captured and cataloged. Then the recordings were mixed together, layered, edited, organized. The result was astonishingly realistic. The Ghost Army could create the sound of thousands of soldiers moving through an area where only a few dozen men actually existed. And timing was everything. The sounds weren't played randomly. Each operation required careful planning. If German observers expected tanks, they heard tanks. If German intelligence expected a convoy, they heard convoys. If commanders believed a division was preparing to attack, they heard exactly the kind of activity that would support that belief. The illusion became almost theatrical, like a massive stage production, except the audience wasn't sitting in a theater. The audience was the German army, and the consequences were life and death. One night, German listening posts might hear the unmistakable sound of armored vehicles approaching. The next morning, reconnaissance aircraft would photograph what appeared to be tanks. Later, intercepted radio transmissions would suggest that a major American unit arrived. Every piece of information reinforced the others. Each layer made the deception more convincing, and the Germans repeatedly fell for it. What made the system so effective was human psychology. People tend to believe information when it comes from multiple sources. If they see tanks, hear tanks, and intercept communications about tanks, they assume the tanks are real. The Ghost Army exploited that instinct perfectly. Some German commanders became convinced they were facing major troop. Others delayed operations because they believed American reinforcements had. Still others shifted valuable units away from critical sectors. Exactly what Allied planners wanted, and all because of carefully choreographed illusions. The men running these operations often found the situation surreal. Imagine standing beside a speaker hidden in the woods, pressing a button, and knowing that miles away, enemy officers were changing battle plans. Recording, it sounded unbelievable, yet it was happening, again and again. Operation after operation, the Ghost Army continued proving that deception could be just as powerful as firepower. But perhaps the most impressive trick of all was still to come, because fooling the enemy's eyes was difficult. Fooling the enemy's ears was difficult. Yet there was another challenge entirely: fooling the enemy's intelligence network. And that would require a weapon even more sophisticated than inflatable tanks or giant speakers. It would require convincing German intelligence officers that they were intercepting real American military communications. And once that operation began, the Ghost Army would become more dangerous than. By late 1944, the Ghost Army had already proven that it could fool German. Inflatable tanks worked, fake camps worked, massive sound systems worked. But there was still one major obstacle. German intelligence officers weren't relying only on what they could see, and they were also listening to American radio traffic. And during World War II, radio communications were often one of the most sources of military intelligence. Every division had its own communication patterns. Every headquarters had its own procedures. Every radio operator had habits that experienced intelligence officers could recognize. The Germans paid close attention to these details, which meant the Ghost Army needed one more layer of deception. They needed fake radio networks, entire fake radio networks. To accomplish this, the Army created another specialized component of the Ghost Army, the Signal Company Special. Its operators were among the most talented communicators in the military. Their mission wasn't simply to send messages. Their mission was to create the illusion of military units that didn't actually exist, and doing that required extraordinary skill. The Germans weren't just intercepting messages. They were studying behavior. For example, every radio operator had a unique style, a unique rhythm, a unique way of transmitting information, much like handwriting or a fingerprint. Experienced intelligence officers could often identify specific operators simply listening. The Ghost Army understood this, so they carefully studied the communication patterns of real American. Then they replicated them, every message, every schedule, every transmission, every detail. If German intelligence expected to hear a specific division operating in a certain area, the Ghost Army made sure the division appeared to be there. Messages flowed continuously. Orders were transmitted. Reports were exchanged. Logistics discussions occurred. Everything sounded authentic because it was designed by professionals. The result was astonishing. German intelligence officers intercepted communications that appeared completely legitimate. From their perspective, the evidence was overwhelming. Reconnaissance aircraft saw tanks. Listening posts heard armored movements. Radio operators intercepted military traffic. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion. Large American forces were present, except they weren't. The entire thing was an illusion. One of the most remarkable aspects of these operations was the level of coordination required. The inflatable tanks had to match the radio traffic. The radio traffic had to match the sound effects. The sound effects had to match the troop movements that German observers expected to see. Every element reinforced the others. One mistake could expose everything. Yet time after time, the Ghost Army succeeded. And as their confidence grew, so did the scale of their operations. Some missions involved creating the illusion of entire divisions. Others involved convincing German commanders that major offensives were begin. In several cases, enemy units were redeployed because of information that had completely fabricated. Think about that. Real soldiers, real tanks, real artillery, moving across real battlefields. Because of fake radio messages created by a few American specialists, the impact was enormous. The Ghost Army had fewer than 200 men, yet through deception, they regularly created the appearance of forces 10 or 20 times larger. Their influence extended far beyond their numbers, and Allied commanders loved it. Every German unit moved in the wrong direction was a victory. Every delayed response was a victory. Every confused commander was a victory. The Ghost Army wasn't destroying enemy divisions. It was manipulating enemy decisions. And in warfare, decisions often matter more than bullets. By early 1945, the unit had become one of the most effective deception organizations in military history. Yet the greatest challenge still lay ahead, because soon the Allies would prepare for some of the final operations of the war. Operations where every mistake could cost thousands of lives. And once again, the Ghost Army would be asked to perform the impossible, this time on a scale larger than ever before. By early 1945, the Ghost Army had become one of the most trusted deception units in all the Allied war effort. The men had already fooled German reconnaissance aircraft. They had fooled German radio operators. They had fooled German intelligence officers. Now Allied commanders wanted something even more ambitious. They wanted the Ghost Army to help protect entire military operations, and in some cases, entire divisions. The stakes had never been higher. By this stage of the war, Germany was losing ground on every front. But the German army remained dangerous, very dangerous. Even weakened divisions could launch devastating counterattacks. A single mistake could cost thousands of Allied lives. Commanders needed every advantage they could get. And that's exactly what the Ghost Army provided. One of the unit's most important missions involved creating the illusion that major American forces were preparing to attack in one location while the real attack occurs somewhere else. The concept sounds simple. In reality, it required extraordinary precision. Imagine being asked to convince German commanders that 30,000 American soldiers were gathered in one area, when in reality, there were fewer than 200 men. Every detail had to be believable. Fake tank formations appeared. Fake headquarters appeared. Fake supply depots appeared. Radio traffic increased dramatically. Sound recordings echoed across the countryside. German observers saw exactly what Allied planners wanted them to see, and remarkably, it worked. Again and again and again. One of the most famous examples occurred near the Rhine River, as Allied forces prepared for some of the final offensives into Germany. Commanders needed to hide their true intentions. Crossing the Rhine was one of the most important military objectives of the war. The Germans knew it. The Allies knew it. Everyone understood that major operations were coming. The question was where. And that uncertainty created an opportunity. The Ghost Army moved into position. Inflatable vehicles appeared. Fake camps expanded. Radio operators generated a flood of communications. Engineers created evidence of troop concentrations. From the German perspective, everything suggested a massive attack was imminent. The deception drew attention exactly where Allied commanders wanted it. German forces reacted. Troops shifted positions. Defensive preparations increased. Resources were committed. Yet much of it was directed toward an illusion. Meanwhile, the real Allied operations continued elsewhere. The beauty of the Ghost Army's work wasn't simply that it fooled the enemy. It was that the deception bought time. Time for real divisions to move. Time for engineers to build bridges. Time for commanders to reposition forces. Time for thousands of soldiers to prepare for battle. Every hour gained mattered. Every day gained mattered. And every German unit sent to the wrong place represented one less obstacle for Allied troops. Many military historians believe the Ghost Army helped save thousands of American lives, not because they won battles directly, but because they reduced the strength of German resistance at critical moments. Imagine being a German commander. Your intelligence reports indicate an American armored division is gathering. Reconnaissance confirms it. Radio intercepts confirm it. Sound recordings seem to confirm it. Naturally, you prepare for that threat. Except the threat doesn't exist. And while you're focused on the illusion, the real attack develops elsewhere. That was the Ghost Army's genius. They manipulated perception, and perception shaped decisions. The soldiers themselves often found the experience surreal. They knew that entire German formations were responding to equipment made of, to sounds coming from speakers, to radio messages designed to deceive. It seemed unbelievable, yet it was happening. The unit had become a weapon unlike any other, not a weapon of destruction, a weapon of confusion. And confusion in war can be devastating. As the war approached its final months, the Ghost Army's confidence continued growing. Operation after operation succeeded. The men knew they were making a difference, but none of them could fully appreciate just how significant their contribution would become. Because decades later, historians would look back and reach a remarkable. The Ghost Army may have been one of the most successful deception units in the entire history of warfare, and yet almost nobody knew it existed. As Allied armies pushed deeper into Germany during the final months of World War II, the men of the Ghost Army continued carrying out some of the most unusual missions of the entire conflict. Again and again, they fooled German intelligence. Again and again, they created phantom divisions. Again and again, they helped protect real American soldiers moving toward the front lines. But there was one thing they could never do: talk about it. From the very beginning, secrecy had been essential to the Ghost Army's success. If the Germans discovered how the deception worked, future operations could. Useless overnight. Every inflatable tank, every fake radio transmission, every sound recording, every carefully crafted illusion depended on the enemy remaining unaware. That meant strict security rules. The men were instructed to reveal as little information as possible. Even other American soldiers often had no idea what the Ghost Army was actually doing. Some troops simply assumed they were engineers. Others thought they were communication specialists. Very few understood the truth, and that secrecy would continue long after the war ended. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, celebrations erupted across Europe and the United States. Church bells rang. Crowds filled city streets. Families welcomed loved ones home. The war in Europe was over. For most soldiers, that meant they could finally tell their stories. The battles they fought, the hardships they endured, the victories they achieved. But for the Ghost Army, things were different. Many of their missions remained classified. The Army wanted to preserve the deception techniques they had developed. Military planners believed similar methods might be useful in future conflicts. As a result, the men returned home, carrying secrets they couldn't fully imagine that. You spend months helping shape military operations. You help save lives. You help fool one of the most powerful armies in the world. And then you're told not to talk about it. That was the reality for many members of the Ghost Army. Some returned to careers in art. Others became architects, designers, businessmen, teachers. They resumed normal lives. Yet, hidden beneath those ordinary lives was an extraordinary story. A story almost nobody knew. For decades, their contribution remained largely invisible. History books focused on famous generals, tank commanders, paratroopers, combat divisions, the men who fought with rifles and artillery. The Ghost Army rarely received attention, not because their work wasn't important, but because much of it remained hidden. Ironically, that secrecy became part of their success. The greatest deception is often the one nobody notices, and the Ghost Army had become masters of deception. Years passed, then decades. Many veterans grew older. Some wondered if the public would ever learn what had really happened. Some feared their story might disappear entirely. Yet slowly, information began emerging. Classified records were reviewed. Military historians started investigating. Former soldiers began sharing memories. And little by little, the truth became known. What researchers discovered surprised many people. The Ghost Army wasn't a minor wartime curiosity. It wasn't a small side project. It had participated in more than 20 major deception operations. It had influenced decisions affecting tens of thousands of soldiers. And according to some historians, its actions may have saved thousands of lives. The revelation changed how many people viewed the unit. What once seemed like a bizarre experiment now appeared remarkably innovative. The men who carried paintbrushes, speakers, and inflatable tanks had victory in ways few could have imagined. But perhaps the most remarkable part of the story was this. They had done it without seeking recognition, without seeking glory, without expecting fame. Their mission had never been about personal achievement. It had been about helping others survive. And in war, few accomplishments are more important than that. Still, the full extent of the Ghost Army's impact remained difficult to measure, because how do you calculate battles that never happened? How do you count casualties that were prevented? How do you measure confusion created inside enemy headquarters? Those questions remain difficult even today. Yet one thing is certain. The Ghost Army had become one of the most successful deception units in military history, and the world was only beginning to understand what they had accomplished. As the decades passed, the story of the Ghost Army slowly began emerging from the shadows. For years, military historians had known fragments of the story. A few documents here, a few veteran interviews there, scattered references hidden inside military archives, but no one fully understood the scale of what the Ghost Army had accomplished. Then researchers started digging deeper, and what they discovered was remarkable. Operation after operation revealed the same pattern. The Ghost Army wasn't occasionally fooling the Germans. It was fooling them repeatedly, again and again. Across France, across Belgium, across Luxembourg, and eventually across Germany itself. Historians examining German military records found evidence that enemy frequently reacted exactly as Allied planners had hoped. Troops were moved, artillery was repositioned, reconnaissance flights were redirected, entire defensive preparations were adjusted. All because German intelligence believed fake armies were real. One historian described the Ghost Army as ours, a force multiplier unlike any other. The term is important. The Ghost Army never contained huge numbers of soldiers. At its peak, the unit had roughly 1,100 men. Yet through deception, it often created the appearance of forces 20 or 30 times larger. Imagine a German commander receiving reports about a large American armored division. Reconnaissance aircraft confirm it. Radio intercepts confirm it. Ground observers confirm it. Everything appears legitimate. Naturally, the commander reacts. Except the entire force exists only in appearance. That was the Ghost Army's genius. They understood something fundamental about intelligence gathering. Information is only valuable if it is accurate. And once you corrupt information, you corrupt decisions. Military historians eventually identified more than 20 major operations involving the Ghost Army. Some lasted only days. Others continued for weeks. Each required enormous planning. Every detail mattered. If a fake division supposedly occupied an area, the evidence had to support that. Story, vehicle tracks, radio traffic, visible equipment, camp activity, movement patterns. Everything had to fit together. And most of the time, it did. One particularly impressive operation occurred near the Rhine River. As Allied forces prepared critical crossings, the Ghost Army created that major American formations were assembling elsewhere. German commanders responded exactly as expected. Attention shifted, resources shifted, defensive preparations shifted. Meanwhile, real Allied forces gained valuable freedom to operate. The operation demonstrated the true power of deception. You don't need to destroy an enemy unit. Sometimes it's enough to convince that unit to move somewhere else. The Ghost Army mastered this concept. As more records became available, researchers began interviewing surviving. Their stories painted an extraordinary picture. Many remembered moments when German artillery targeted fake positions. Shells crashed into inflatable tanks. Bombs landed on fake camps. Enemy forces committed real firepower against imaginary targets. The soldiers often found the situation almost unbelievable. A rubber tank could attract the same attention as a real one. A speaker playing recorded sounds could influence military decisions. A handful of radio operators could create the illusion of an entire division. Yet it worked. Not because the Germans were incompetent. Quite the opposite. The Germans were highly capable opponents. What made the Ghost Army successful was its attention to detail. Every deception was carefully designed. Every illusion reinforced by multiple forms of evidence. The Germans weren't fooled by one trick. They were fooled by dozens of interconnected tricks operating. That distinction is important, because successful deception isn't about lying once. It's about creating an alternative reality that appears completely believable. And the Ghost Army became extraordinarily good at doing exactly that. As historians pieced together the full story, a new realization emerged. The Ghost Army represented something larger than a single military unit. It represented a different way of thinking about warfare, a reminder that intelligence, creativity, and imagination can sometimes achieve results that brute force cannot. And that lesson would continue influencing military planners long after World War II ended. In fact, many modern deception techniques can trace their origins back to the strange collection of artists, designers, and illusionists who once crossed Europe, carrying inflatable tanks and giant loudspeakers. The world was finally beginning to appreciate what they had accomplished. But perhaps the most remarkable recognition was still to come. For decades after World War II, the men of the Ghost Army remained largely unknown. The irony was impossible to miss. They had helped deceive the German army. They had participated in operations that influenced major military decisions. They had potentially saved thousands of Allied lives. And yet, most Americans had never heard of them. While famous generals filled history books and decorated combat divisions received widespread recognition, the Ghost Army quietly faded into the background. Many veterans accepted this reality. After all, secrecy had been part of the job from the very beginning. They weren't fighting for fame. They weren't fighting for medals. They were fighting to help win a war. And in that mission, they had succeeded. Still, as the years passed, historians and military researchers began asking an important question. How could a unit this successful remain so overlooked? The more researchers investigated, the more surprising the answer became. Much of the Ghost Army's work had remained classified for decades. Even after portions of the story became public, the details were often scattered. Across different archives, reports, and personal accounts, there was no single dramatic battle that defined their legacy, no famous photograph that captured their contribution, no iconic moment that everyone remembered. Instead, their success was spread across dozens of operations, dozens of deceptions, dozens of invisible victories, and invisible victories are often the hardest to celebrate. By the late 20th century, surviving members of the Ghost Army had become elderly men. Many wondered whether their story would ever receive the recognition it deserved. Some gave interviews. Others donated documents. Many shared memories that had remained private for years. Slowly, public awareness began to grow. Books were written, documentaries were produced. Military historians highlighted the unit's achievements. What emerged was a remarkable picture. The Ghost Army had participated in more than 20 battlefield deception operations. Its members had repeatedly placed themselves near active combat zones, and despite carrying relatively few weapons, they had operated in dangerous conditions where discovery could have been fatal. Think about the risk. If German forces had realized the truth while Ghost Army soldiers were operating close to the front, the consequences could have been catastrophic. They were not protected by large armored formations. They were not surrounded by thousands of infantrymen. Often, they relied on speed, secrecy, and the hope that the illusion would hold. That required courage. A different kind of courage than charging a machine gun nest, but courage nonetheless. Eventually, the US government began formally recognizing the units. Military historians praised the Ghost Army as one of the most innovative organizations of World War II. Veterans groups highlighted their achievements. Museums created exhibits dedicated to their story. And younger generations began learning about a chapter of history that had nearly been forgotten. For many Americans, the revelation was surprising. World War II is one of the most studied conflicts in history. Yet here was an entire unit whose story remained largely hidden for decades. A unit that helped shape the outcome of operations without firing large numbers of shots. A unit that demonstrated the power of imagination in warfare. Today, Many historians consider the Ghost Army one of the most underrated organizations of the entire war, not because it won battles alone, not because it defeated Germany by itself, but because it provided something every successful military operation needs: an advantage, an edge, an opportunity. And sometimes, a single opportunity can change everything. As surviving veterans grew older, one thing became increasingly clear. Their legacy was finally being recognized, not as a curiosity, not as a footnote, but as a genuine contribution to Allied victory. The artists, the designers, the radio operators, the sound engineers, the men with inflatable tanks, they had earned their place in history. And the story of the Ghost Army was finally stepping out of the shadows. Yet perhaps the greatest lesson of their story had nothing to do with war at all, because their success revealed something timeless, a truth that remains just as powerful today as it was in 1945. Sometimes the most effective weapon isn't strength. Sometimes it's creativity. The Ghost Army never stormed the beaches of Normandy. It never led massive tank assaults. It never became as famous as the airborne divisions or the Marines who fought across the Pacific. Yet its impact on World War II was undeniable. For years, the men of the Ghost Army operated in the shadows. They created armies that didn't exist. They moved divisions that weren't there. They convinced experienced German commanders to make real decisions based on carefully crafted illusions. And somehow, they did it again and again. The remarkable thing is that the Ghost Army succeeded because it understood something fundamental about warfare. Battles are fought with weapons. Wars are fought with information. Every commander relies on intelligence. Every general depends on reports. Every military decision begins with an understanding of reality. The Ghost Army's genius was simple. They changed reality, or at least, they changed what the enemy believed reality to be. And once they controlled what German commanders believed, they could influence. German commanders did. That influence saved lives. Thousands of lives. American soldiers crossed rivers that might have been heavily defended. Divisions advanced against weakened resistance. Operations succeeded because enemy units were looking in the wrong direction. The Ghost Army didn't replace traditional combat forces. It made those forces more effective. And in doing so, it proved something extraordinary. Creativity can be a weapon. Imagination can be a weapon. Innovation can be a weapon. The artists who joined the Ghost Army probably never imagined they would become part of military history. Many had spent their lives drawing, designing, painting, and building. Then suddenly, those same skills became tools of war. A painter helped create fake armies. An illustrator helped deceive enemy intelligence. A designer helped shape battlefield strategy. It's one of the most unlikely success stories of the entire Second World War. And perhaps that's why it continues to fascinate people today, because it reminds us that heroism comes in many forms. Some heroes charge into battle. Some heroes fly aircraft. Some heroes command armies. And some heroes carry inflatable tanks across muddy fields while convincing the enemy they are facing an army that doesn't exist. All of them matter. All of them contribute. All of them help shape history. Today, military academies around the world still study deception operations. Modern armies continue using many of the principles pioneered by the Ghost Army. Technology has changed. The battlefield has changed. But the basic lesson remains the same. If you can control what your enemy believes, you can influence what your... That lesson helped the Allies win World War II. And few units demonstrated it better than the Ghost Army. For decades, their story remained hidden. Now it stands as a reminder that some of the most important victories are the ones nobody sees. Not every hero becomes famous. Not every contribution appears in history books. But sometimes, behind every great victory, there are forgotten heroes quietly making the impossible possible. The Ghost Army was one of those stories, one of those units, one of those remarkable chapters of history. And now, their legacy finally receives the recognition it deserves. Thank you for watching War Stories Daily. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. Do you think deception can be just as powerful as military force in war? Or would you rather trust tanks, artillery, and soldiers than illusions and misinformation? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy real war stories, forgotten heroes, incredible true events, the hidden history behind the world's greatest conflicts, make sure to subscribe. Join us for future episodes. Because here at War Stories Daily, we remember the stories history almost forgot. Until next time, thank you for watching.